everybody. Thanks for joining us here today. This is Nicole with Topaz, and I'm so happy to welcome Ali Elhajj, a first-time presenter here for Topaz. Today he's going to be talking about controlling noise in HDR imagery using Topaz Denoise in your HDR workflow. Before I turn it over to Ali, let me tell you just a little bit more about him. He is a fine art photographer based out of Orlando, and he specializes, as you can tell, in high dynamic range photography, which is some of our favorite types, or one of our favorite types of photography here at Topaz. So this workshop that he'll be talking about today is going to be taking a good look at being able to create a clean image using Topaz Denoise during your HDR workflow. So he's going to tell you all about how he post-processes to get that really clean image. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Ali.
All right, well, thanks everybody for joining. I'm talking about controlling noise in HDR today. And we're going to go through a couple of the different images and have some time for Q&A at the end. Now, when it comes to processing, obviously I use Topaz, and that's why we're all here today to talk about Denoise. Once you bring the image in, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit here in Lightroom, what you see is, hey, I'm not seeing a lot of color noise. It's definitely there, but when you import your images into Lightroom, it will actually try to do as good of a job as it can, and it does an okay job. I don't think it gives you as much control, and it's definitely not as robust as Denoise, but it will try to remove some of the noise for you. The first thing that you want to do is to go ahead and to turn that off. You don't want Lightroom to be making any adjustments to the image before you do. So this here is actually the interior of a submarine that was actually used after World War II. It was being built during World War II, and it's now sitting at the Patriots Point Museum in South Carolina, and next to it actually is an aircraft carrier. Anyhow, so I was on the move shooting this shot. Shot this at ISO 3200 f4. I didn't have a lot of time to set up. I was just kind of walking through, and couldn't take my tripod down there. So here we are. We've got a lot of noise in this image, and starting out, and like I said, go ahead, drop the color noise, drop the luminance noise reduction in Lightroom. You don't want it to make those decisions for you. Now, if you're using ACR in Camera Raw, you can do the same thing in Camera Raw. I use Lightroom, so does make my life easier for a lot of things. So let's go ahead and fire up Denoise. So you can go ahead and use the Fusion Express, and it's going to ask me what I want to do here. Go ahead and hit Edit. If I hit Edit, it'll actually come up. So there we go. It's going to ask me what I want to use, and if I want to use Adjust or Clean or whatever. But just go ahead and say I want to use Denoise. Now, the neat thing about Denoise is it's got a lot of presets. So if you just say, hey, you know what, I really don't want to think about it, you can say, all right, this is a raw image. I want a light amount of Denoise. So, oh, well, actually it's moderate, or strong, stronger, and then there's strongest and whatnot. Those will do a pretty good job most of the time, but it would be good for you to kind of understand what the tool is doing so that you can control various parts of the image. So try to zoom out here real quick. Let it do its thing. And it's not going to let me do that. All right, it's all right. But let me zoom in back in. So you can see here I just kind of chose raw and strong, and there's the before, and there's the after. It does a pretty good job, but this would be a really boring webinar if I just told you how to use a preset. I think what you really want to do is understand this tool, because it does offer you a lot of flexibility. So I'm going to go ahead and reset all, and first thing we want to do is take this over to Luma. So we're looking at luminance noise and looking at a highlight area, I'm sorry, a midtone area, like right here. We can begin by dialing up the overall strength till we see the noise go. And now every time you move that slider and let it go, it is going to recalculate so that it's letting you know, hey, this is the effect. Still not happy with it here. I'm going to bump it up a little bit more. And there we go. So that's before, that's after, and it's better to kind of keep it. You don't want to push it all the way up. It's better to keep it lower. So if you're thinking, oh, maybe this should be 25, you're looking at a midtone area. So you're still going to have, let's see here, I've got more of a shadow area right over here. So there you have sliders that will allow you to adjust that if you need to. Especially like this part of the image, I'll move over here where, all right, this is definitely a shadow area right under here. So the overall, well, we'll do a pretty good job, but then what you can do is you can dial down. So, okay, I want a little bit less in the shadow area, and typically you want a little bit more in the shadow areas. So you can say, okay, I'll take that up, dial it up. There we are. That looks nice and clean. Again, this is before, this is after. And you can decide if you feel, okay, I'm losing too much detail in the shadows. You can dial this down a little bit. I'm going to go down here a little and see what effect that has. Maybe it's 0.7 is too little. Dial it back up. And if you're like me, you'll probably spend half an hour doing this just to make sure that you've got it exactly where you want it to be. And, I think maybe 0.9 where it was initially was what I really liked. So back there. So that's pretty good. Definitely the noise down here, right where my hand is definitely a lot better. Now, once you've got the shadow area taken care of, you can then navigate around, and it's actually a lot easier to use this right here. You can kind of navigate around and try to do it just by clicking inside the image itself. If you use the navigator here in the top right, you see where my mouse is, make your life a lot simpler. But then you can go to a highlight area and see what that looks like. And kind of the same thing that you did with the shadow area, you've got a slider for the highlights as well. I think the highlights actually look pretty good, so I'm not too concerned about noise there, but just kind of move it around a little bit, see what it looks like. Yeah, I think it looks pretty good, maybe a little bit more. All right, there we go. Now what you want to do is you want to look at your two color channels that you've got. Now, we've been looking here at Luma so far. Sometimes what you want to do is just kind of go back and say, okay, now this is what it looked like before, and with just color, and then this is what it looks like after. So you go out of the luminance channel, look at the original image, and just kind of check it out, and you can make a determination if you need to go ahead and make a change. Now, next thing we do is we look, like I mentioned, at the color channels, red and blue. I'm just going to go over here. I've got this is actually a torpedo. These are actually living quarters that we're looking at, and they had torpedoes in there, so it makes for an interesting job. So let me go to the red channel, and there's what we're looking at before. You can see there's a little bit of artifacting here, and a little bit of noise there, so I can kind of bump up the noise reduction if I want. See what it looks like. There we go, that's before, that's after, and we can kind of just go back here to 0 so you can look at the difference. All right, so yeah, so definitely want to go back to where we were there. Let's take 14. Maybe we can go a little bit more. Now, a lot of times I think in photography we want to turn this into a science. Like, okay, I'm looking at a green torpedo shot at ISO 3200 inside of a submarine at f4. I've got to be at 0.21. That's just not the case. You're going to have to go with what your eye sees. Every image is going to be different. There's going to be some factors. I don't know if you're shooting, let's say, and it's hot out, and you've really been putting your camera through its paces. Your sensor is going to be hotter than, let's say, you're shooting somewhere cool, so you're going to get more noise. It's not an absolute science. What you're looking for is to reduce the noise based on the image that you're working at. So I think 0.21 looks good. Now go over to the blue channel, and let's move over here a little bit. All right, we can bump this up. Let's see what that looks like. Looks pretty good. Maybe bump it up a little bit more. All right, I like that. Before, here's after. Now we go to the color channel, or we go to look at all color noise. So this is before, and what you're seeing here is a lot of high frequency noise. It's called high frequency noise because the noise is just very close. You'll see it as like the little dots, so to speak. We've got the color slider, and what that's going to allow us to do is to look at some of the low frequency noise that we've got in the image. And you'll see this, let's say someone's wearing a black shirt and you're shooting late into the evening, or you've got a lot of shadows. You will see this low frequency color noise in the form of like splotches. So you can go ahead and clean the color noise there. There we go. You can kind of see this is before and after, but let me draw this back down so you can see it. If you look right in this area right here, there we go. You can kind of see we got some larger areas of noise here. Dial this back up. That looks pretty good. Now, if you have large areas of black, and you also have some, like the color will be, let's say, a little reddish black, you can use the correct black level. Now here we don't really have a lot of that we need to be concerned about. It's looking pretty good already, but I'm going to go back here to the shadow area and just go back to RGB and see if I see that. I think the blacks look pretty good. But if we did need that, we can adjust it here. Just have a little bit of control over the cast. Now I'm going to go back to mid-tone area and just kind of do a comparison again, before and after. So this is before. You can see it's just a mess, and after, it's a lot cleaner. And what I really like is you still have all this detail here. So you can lose that with a lot of other tools that are out there, but I didn't lose my detail. I didn't turn it into just like one big blob, and that's one thing I really appreciate about this. Now I can go down here though and say, oh, you know what? Maybe I did lose a little bit of detail. You can recover some detail, kind of like a fine tuning, dialing down some of that noise reduction. And again, you may or may not need that. So, and then we've got here, you can reduce blur. I tend not to use this one a lot, but works well with skies, I think. And then if you feel like your image is now turning into a piece of plastic, you can add some grain back. Now, do I want to do that here? I don't know. Let's see what it looks like. I'm not sure that I do because I think it looks pretty good. And dial it up a little bit more. Now, mind you, this image wasn't taken with like a 5D3 or anything. This is actually taken with a 50D, which is a crop sensor and it's a high density sensor. So you got 15 megapixels, crammed into an APS-C sensor. So it's actually for an ISO 3200 image. Looking at it from before, after, I think it's pretty good. Now, the last one here is kind of a lot of folks look at this one as a mysterious one, debanding. All banding noise is, it looks like strips of noise across your image. Now, I don't have any banding noise here, so I'm not worried about it, but you can add debanding on the horizontal and the vertical axes if you need to. And then you can just kind of say, okay, I think the strip is about, yay big, and it will take care of that for you. But I think this is looking pretty good, so hit OK. Taking this back to Lightroom. Now notice too that I did this before I ran it through whatever tone mapping software I'm going to use. And you want to do that first because, let's say Photomatix or Nik or whatever it is, will actually multiply noise. So if you try to tone map then reduce the noise, yeah, you can do it. You can get away with it. But if you really want as much detail as you can draw out of the image, you want to do it beforehand. And let's just let it process through. Sure, here I've got no question coming in from Nicole at times. Almost there. Now, mind you, it's doing a lot of masks, so this is going to take a little bit of time, but it's not that bad. And if you think it's too slow, it's always a good time to upgrade.
I do have a couple questions actually, Ali, coming through.
Sure, go ahead.
One of the questions is asking about your overall process. Is this what you would normally do, go take an image into Denoise before taking it into your HDR program?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You will get a cleaner output. There's no question about it. Because what your HDR program will do is it'll see, okay, I've got contrast here, especially with luminoise, and it'll go, okay, well, this must be a contrast area. Then what I need to do is I need to amplify that. So you want to do it here. I can't say, sometimes if I think the image is, pretty clean, I'm outside, I don't have a lot of shadows, I think I might be able to just kind of get away with it. But, when you're looking at, hey, I want the cleanest image that I can get, then you want to do it this way. So,
okay.
Okay.
And also when you have 3 images or more, when you're doing the more traditional, and he is going to be doing that later,
Yep.
Everybody who's asking. That's his next
Yep,
workflow. Do you suggest the same thing, going through each one through Denoise first, if you have a lot of noise in it?
Yeah, so, what I'll skip at this point is, okay, now we tone map it and all that. And I think we have a little bit of time where we can do that.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, so let me do that, and then we'll hop in. I've got, we're going to work on one of the shuttle shots here where we'll talk about, okay, well, gosh, how many of these images do I really want to denoise? But, all right, so this is our image here. We're just going to go ahead and export this to Photomatix. We're not going to spend a ton of time in here, explaining every single slider because otherwise we won't get to anything else. So I'm just going to do this real quick. But all right, so hey, let's hit painterly because that's always fun. That's too much. Just dial down this here. I'm not too happy with the color temp. So sometimes it's easy to do it here. Now, I know what you're thinking out there. Why didn't he create 2 diffs? Well, 1 over or 2 over and 2 under from the original that he had. Yeah, we can do that. Obviously, that's a great way to do it, but just for what we're doing today, we don't need to do that. So I'm doing what I always do. I kind of bounce around and I go, oh, you know what? I'm just going to do this manually. And let's see, don't want a lot of saturation. And let's draw this back up a little bit. And let's drop down the temperature a little bit. And maybe it's too cool there. All right, save and re-import. And obviously, you know, if really was working on this image, I'd take a lot more time with it. But why am I telling you about this? You'll just kind of see in a second. While we're going through this exercise, not really spending that much time on it. But all right. So here we go. This is what comes out of Photomatics now. Let's go back out. So this is the original. I don't know if you saw that, so I'll go back. This is you know, the original raw. This is what we got out of Denoise, and this is what we got out of Photomatics now. Now here, oh man, I got a little bit of noise. So there's two things that you can do. You can go ahead and denoise it again in Lightroom, or what I like to do is I'll just go ahead and, you know, open it in Photoshop. The original. Now, you don't always have to do this. One thing you can do is you can go, you know, filter, go back into Denoise and do that, and then you can use, and I won't go ahead and do all that right now, but let me just duplicate another layer. Let's say we did some denoising here. You can kind of go back in, and this will come in very handy for you, as you can go back in and just say, okay, you know what, I can denoise it again, and then just using layer masks, you can paint in on the layer mask how much denoise you want in a specific area. And again, we're not going to spend any time on that, and I'm not going to go ahead and denoise it again, but I just want to let you know that this is something I do a lot, especially if I have skies, because I find that the sky tends to need more denoising than, you know, let's like the main subject that I've got, like let's say a landscape or what, you know, building that I'm looking at. So using layer masks, if you haven't fiddled with them, basically pretty simple. Paint black on a layer mask, opens up to the layer below, paint white, and it just takes more of the layer that you're currently on. So just keep that in mind that, you know, you do have that. So let me just go ahead and close it. I'm not going to talk too much about that. Don't save it. All right, so that's a single raw, and again, you know, before cone mapping this, we could have taken this TIFF file here that came out of denoising, and then we could have created two copies and bumped up the exposure on one and bumped it down on the other, and ran that through Photomatics, and, you know, that gives us a little bit more control. But let's kind of hop into sort of your typical HDR workflow, unless somebody has a question right now.
We have lots of questions, but I think I'm going to save them till the end, if that's all right, because they'll just keep pouring in.
Oh yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
I think you're about to answer a lot of them in this workflow.
All right. So here we've got the shuttle shot. All right. So this is Endeavor. This is after she was decommissioned, and she's still going through. Actually, the engines are missing out here. You can see that the nose cone is actually gone. And they had removed all the pyrotechnics and was sitting in the vehicle assembly building before it was shipped off. This is actually November of last year, so almost a year old here for an image. But okay, so how much, you know, denoising do I want to do? How much time do I want to spend in denoise, and how much do I want to do in you know, just in Lightroom? All right. I feel a lot of times that if I've got, you know, on, like, let's say my +2 image, that, you know, sometimes I've got just a little bit of luminance noise, I can just, bam, get rid of it in Lightroom. Now, when I get into the darker images, you're going to get your signal to noise ratio drops, and your sensor is going to have a hard time. At that point, I really don't want to do it in Lightroom. And it'll vary by image. You're going to have to look at it and say, okay, you know, you could just, it could be as simple as, all right, let me fiddle with these sliders. Am I happy in the shadow areas? Am I happy in the highlight areas? Does the image look plasticky? Am I losing a lot of detail? I tend to find that you know, as good as the Lightroom denoise tool is, it tends to be more of a blunt instrument, whereas something like, you know, Topaz's denoise is more robust and gives me a lot more control over the various aspects of the image. Now here I've got, obviously I'm looking here at, highlights, some midtones. I'm getting into the shadows here. And definitely here what I was exposing for in this image and in this image is I wanted to get more detail out of these windows. So here I would definitely want to go out and, edit in, go in here. I would definitely want to take this out to Denoise and kind of run through the same thing again. And this is actually a fairly noisy image. I was exposing for these windows. All right, so you can kind of see this is a little bit messy. Let's see, and start out. Again, we just kind of reset all. We go back, we look at the luminance noise, adjust for overall strength. And we want to, oh, that's too much. So you dial it down. Dial it down. Especially if you start seeing things like, you've gone too far when you start to see this. Things are going blurry, and now you're starting to see like posterization, and obviously you don't want that. So it's better to err here, and again, you can just kind of keep dialing it down until you get to where, okay, so this is before on the Luma, and this is after on the luminance noise. And that looks pretty good. I'm looking at this stuff here, say, okay, now how many of these tiles what am I losing in these tiles? Am I losing anything over here? Now, I think here I might be losing a little bit more than I'd like. So, again, this is your starting point on the overall. And, okay, so that's before, that's after. That's actually pretty good for a starting point. Now I'm going to start walking around these shadows and saying, okay, what am I seeing here? What am I seeing here? What is it looking like? Okay, let's take it. I kind of want to see both up here and down here. So I think what I'd want to do is bump up the shadows a little bit more. If I'm posterizing, I want to dial it back. You want to be careful. You don't want to create artifacts that you don't want to see. Now, let's say you do that. You can go back in a lot of times and reduce the blur a little bit, and maybe add more grain to get rid of like just kind of the flatness. Now that's too much more grain coming back, but you see I got rid of the posterization that I was seeing. Oops, I moved it up accidentally. So again, this is before. It's before. It's after. I might still have a little bit too much. Before, it's after. So it's actually pretty good. I'm not seeing a lot of posterization. And you're going to spend some time just kind of saying, okay, can I go a little less? Can I go a little less? Can I get a little bit more detail back? That's part and parcel of doing this. I mean, we get a lot of criticism of HDR. It's like, oh, you're just moving a slider or two. You're not really doing any work. But if you really spend time doing this, you know that there is just a lot of work that goes in to getting these images just right. So, all right, am I happy with this one yet? I don't know. I want to see how much. Let me go back over here and seeing just kind of what it looks like. I might just drop the grain down a little bit more. And then we'll just kind of go through our red. I have a lot of red noise. No, I really don't have a lot of noise in the red channel. Back over here and see what that looks like. This looks pretty good. Let's look at the blue channel. Looks pretty good. Go back down over here to the shadows. It's not too shabby. what does our color noise look like? I'm expecting to see some over here, and you can kind of see that I do have a little bit of it, so clean the color a little. There we go, starting to drop it. Just got to make sure I check and walk around the image again and make sure that, hey, I'm not starting to posterize by just overdoing it. So now let's see, RGB. That's before, and this is after. It's cleaner, but I could probably go back and maybe, you know, I'd have to be careful because now I'm balancing. Okay, how much posterization am I going to get with how much noise reduction am I going to get? So let's see. This is pretty good. So I just kind of increased it again on the overall strength. Let's look at over here. Okay, so this is definitely a lot cleaner image than what I had before. And maybe I can drop the grain a little bit more. So the more shadows you have in an image, the more you're going to spend time on it. Let's let it do its thing. We can take another question real quick.
Okay, we have quite a few people asking if you would take each individual image during this multi-image process into Denoise separately and work on them differently.
Yes, because every image is going to have a different characteristic. Yeah, it's the same image, you're looking at the same thing, but the longer your exposure is going to get, the more noise you're going to have. And also, when you're looking at a darker image, your signal-to-noise ratio is going to drop. So that's going to affect it. So it's not like you can, you know, go in and let's say create a preset real quick and just say, oh, I'm just shooting the space shuttle, I'm on a tripod, I'm not moving, and I can just do all of them the same. You know, and again, you know, you're going to have to decide how much time and effort you want and how clean an image you want to create. You know, sometimes I don't want to spend all night doing this. Okay, fine. You know, but you know that's going to affect your output. The cleaner you want the image, the more time that you're going to spend on it. I can tell you that on an average image, and I'm not going to say I spend an hour on denoise, but on an average image, I will spend 1 to 2.5 hours working on it, maybe even longer. And that's, you know, I walk around my images a lot. Like I'll do, you know, I'll work on it and then I'll walk around and say, okay, what am I seeing here? Am I losing detail here? It's good to be a little bit obsessive. If you have that personality type, it's going to help you. You might not watch as much TV, but that's okay.
All right. I have one other question here for you. You were talking about posterization quite a bit within Denoise. Can you explain what you mean by that? A couple people are asking.
Yeah, let me go back into it. Let me just. It might be easier just to show it to you than to, you know, try to give you a sort of a textbook definition. Mm-hmm. So let me go back in here. You will see posterization in the sky a lot, and it kind of looks like you just switched your monitor back to an 8-bit display or something. I'll show it to you here. So here we are again. We're looking, and we're going to look at the wing again, right? So here's our wing, and I'm just going to bump this up to some kind of crazy value. All right, so this is before. This is posterization right here, where you're getting splotches of color, and there is no transition between one to the other. You will see this a lot, like I said, if you're shooting, let's say, you know, right at sunset, and you try to denoise the sky, and you have a gradation between bright to dark. As you approach the, you know, as you move away from the horizon, if you overdo your noise, you are going to get this. So you want to be really careful that, okay, and I don't care what tool you use. You do this in Lightroom or Denoise or whatever it is that you're using. You want to be careful not to introduce that into your image, because once it's there, if you do it and you introduce it early and then you go in and next thing you know you've got 30 layers in Photoshop and you're like, oh man, I've got posterization. Your only solution at that point is to go back, redo your denoise, redo your tone mapping, and start all over again. And from the voice of somebody who's done it, that is not a great place to be, because you're thinking, oh man, I'm almost done, and now you have to start all the way back over. So be really, really careful. Spend the time. A lot of times we just kind of want to, kind of come in here, hit one of these presets and go. And that's great. I mean, these presets work pretty good, but they're not going to be a replacement for your judgment. And again, like I said, most of the time they'll work, but you want to just take the time and obsess over your image a little bit. You'll get a cleaner image in the end, and an image that's more detailed.
Great, thank you. I'll let you get back to the workflow now.
Oh, okay, great. All right, so let's see. We got this one, 29. I got. Let's go back and out. I don't care about that. That's good. This one here, and again, I want to come in here and make sure I'm not doing anything in here. Now, drop this here, just so that we've got 6 images. I don't want to go ahead and do all this in here. Now, this image is definitely going to need to go back into Topaz. Other than Shooting Express, edit, and I'm just going to do this one real quick. I won't talk a lot. And actually, hey, what the heck? Well, for this one here, just for fun, we can go ahead and just use one of the presets, simply because we're crunched on time right now, and we got a lot of images to work through. So that's moderate. I personally think that's too much. Drop it down. You can use also, one thing that you can do, if you don't want to reset all and go through every single one individually, you can just kind of use a preset. I do this sometimes too. Just gotta use a preset. It's pretty good. Then I'll just kind of drop it down a little bit, or say, you know what, I need a little bit more in the shadows. That's perfectly fine. This is sort of the analog of using after priority versus shooting manual. Sometimes you just kind of want something else to make some of the decisions for you. But right here, you see I've got a little bit of color in my black. That's when the correct black color comes in pretty handy. If that's not doing it, then it's just clean color. Bump it up a little bit more. You can bump it up a little bit more. There you go. I like that a lot more. Now this one's still a little noisy, but we'll just leave it be for now.
And while that's processing, I do have a quick question for you.
Okay.
Photo Jeff says, if you were going to be enlarging to, say, a 6-foot print, would you enlarge it first and then use denoise, or would you use denoise and then do an enlarging on your image?
That's a pretty good question. I think I would denoise it first before enlarging it, because I think that you've got. I think if you enlarge it first, then you might not have the noise will be sort of distributed over a larger area, and it might be harder to clean. Whereas if you clean it and then make it bigger, your life will be easier.
All right, thanks.
Sure. Take that with a grain of salt. I'm not a guy who typically does 6-foot images either, so you guys can go on the internet and say Ali was wrong.
No, I agree with you. Anytime you manipulate the noise makes it much more difficult to get out.
Yep. Now, let's just take these real quick. This one here, I think I could probably get away with Actually, I would rather do this in Denoise, but we'll just kind of bump it up a little bit. So 1, 2, let's see, yeah, so 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'll export to. All right, so I'm not going to use any of the, I don't need to align these images. I don't need to reduce noise again. I really don't. I'd rather do the chromatic aberrations in Lightroom. But what I want to do right now is just get it tone mapped real quick and get it into Photoshop. Nicole, how are we doing on time? Am I, are we
You have about 10 more minutes, and then
okay.
Yeah, I'm actually going to ask you a question as you're going to. I had a question, it was a little bit earlier, so I forget who asked it, but basically it was whether you still use the noise reduction within Photomatics even after you've done Topaz Denoise. And I saw that you didn't check it. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, no, don't. Yeah, I don't want it to make the decision. You know, again, it's a pretty blunt tool. You know, because what it's going to do is it's going to try to do the denoising on the TIFFs, you know, that are produced from, you know, from Lightroom, and you don't want that. You've already done the denoising. You don't want it to go in and do that again because it's kind of a black box. I mean, don't get me wrong, Photomatics is a great product, but it is a black box at that point. You don't really know what it's going to do. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay, I'll let you get back to it.
No worries. So here we go. Now we'll just. Now sometimes you get here and you go, oh, I got too much noise in this one area, and then you can go back and redo it. It depends on your image. I think I've got a little bit more than I like, but let's see. But I can tell you it's a lot less than if I would have just denoised. If I would have just done this without denoising it. Now I would probably go back and say, let me spend a little bit more time on this. Let's see here. I tend to not like a lot of lights, a lot of saturation. That's just me. It's my style. I think I'm just I see too much on Flickr where somebody did this. It's like, see, my computer's so smart it won't even let me do it. You know, so don't do that. And don't do that and that. That's bad. Anyhow, but I've preached. All right, so there we go. Micro smoothing. Actually, we can do that if we want, but kind of tend to like this low. So save and re-import. We'll just spend another minute or two. I'll just talk a little bit about some of the things I do in Photoshop, but not a ton of time. All right, so there's our image. It's not too shabby. Not too shabby, actually. And now we will edit this in Photoshop. I'm just hitting Control-E. Edit. One thing that you will see right out of tone mapping is you're going to lose contrast. So let me just show my layers here. Hit Control-J. Just that's what you need to do as a good Photoshopper, is to make sure that you can always go back, and then we can say take the levels adjustment, add some contrast back, and it will always. You're always going to lose some detail after tone mapping. So I can duplicate the layer. I like high pass filter just because I'll get edge detection. You don't want to overdo this. I tend to like to stay right around 1.5, 2.2, depending on the size of the image. Okay. And Send this to an overlay, and that's not too bad. Now I'll probably want to crop this, and I probably won't do it in here. I'll probably just go ahead and, although I love the new CS6 crop tool, it actually finally makes sense. One thing you couldn't do in 5.1 is, do what I'm doing right now, which is go, oh, this crop is a little different. Or I screwed up the crop a little bit, I need to move it around. Anyhow, I think we're going to run out of time if I don't give time for questions. But that's Denoise in a nutshell. Now, there's some things that you can get into, like for me, looking at this image, this is definitely a no-no for me. I would want to probably take one of the original images and bring back this blown-out detail. I probably should have reduced the chromatic aberrations in Lightroom, because I've got them right here. I know I've got them in, I got a little bit right here. So there's things that you can do right here that, that we should have done. And if we had more time, we could have gone into it. And then again, down here, you walk around your image as much as you can and find areas that you need to address. And I will use a layer mask and bring back one of the images that's closest to whatever the exposure is right here, and then paint this back in so I don't have just kind of bright white spots. I kind of like the grunge. I mean, maybe it's a little, and this isn't a plasticky image. It's got a little bit of grunge to it, but at the same time, it's not. Maybe I'll go with it that way. So, anyhow, I'll leave it up to questions, and we can finish up with there. So.
All right, thank you so much.
Oh, there you are.
Okay. First question, several questions about what camera you used to take this particular image.
All right, this was actually shot with a 50D, and I was shooting, probably like a lot of folks, you start out, I was shooting a crop sensor. I decided initially to invest in lenses, so I had a 50D, but my lenses were all L lenses, and then I just upgraded to a full frame not that long ago. And if you're curious, I went with a 5D2 simply because I'm on a tripod a lot of times, and I felt like the $1,000 going up to a 5D3 would have been better spent on a lens.
Nice.
So yeah.
Okay. I have a question from Richard. He asks, he says, your workflow requires that you convert RAW to TIFF before taking the image into Photomatics. He asks if you could briefly speak to the advantages or disadvantages of using RAW versus TIFF as the immediate HDR input into Photomatics.
All right, so if you look at Photomatics' website, that is actually one of their recommendations is to convert them to TIFF first, because Photomatics will try to process the RAW for you. However, it's not as good as a RAW processor as Lightroom or Camera Raw is. So do that first. You will get better results, I think. Look, it's not. I think sometimes we get into these back and forth. Oh well, it's better. It is better, but you don't have to do it. It does do a pretty good job most of the time, but kind of like in the case of, let's say, when we were looking at the single raw image, you would be better to, like this image again here of the submarine. And let me go ahead and hide that window. You would be better off to, go in here and take one up and then one down and generate multiple TIFFs and feed that into Photomatics. There won't be as much dynamic range for Photomatics to have to sift through and figure out as like in a full raw file.
Okay, thanks. I do have a couple questions about which cameras are producing less noise. Topaz asks, is there less noise in high-resolution cameras like the D800E? Bob asks, do you find the full-frame camera produces less noise than the 50D? So if you could kind of speak to your knowledge on
Sure.
that.
A full frame sensor camera will definitely have less noise than a crop sensor. It's really a matter of simple physics. The smaller the overall sensor is, the smaller the pixel pitch that you've got. So just kind of think of it as buckets. If you've got a full frame sensor, you've got larger buckets. Now it takes more light to fill a larger bucket, a larger pixel, for it to respond and give you a signal. So you will get a cleaner image just for that alone. In terms of the D800 and the D800E, I don't think you're going to see a large difference in the amount of noise coming out between the 800 and the E. The E is simply, it just doesn't have an anti-aliasing filter. So you will, if you're looking, I don't know, let's say a brick or something, you will get more moire. It'll look like a, kind of think of it as sort of like a bullseye pattern or something that you will see in your images. However, if you're looking at something, let's say the stars, you will get a sharper image because you don't have an anti-aliasing filter. I think the D800 is a fantastic camera. It's really great at pulling out shadow detail. I think it's got a fantastic sensor. I'm a Canon guy, and there's like 3 things you don't discuss on the internet. I watch this, maybe 5 of them, but one is Canon versus Nikon, the other is politics, religion, Android versus Apple. But if you want to film my Twitter stream with that, we can do that too. But definitely, the larger your sensor, so let's say an APS-C sensor is going to have less noise, and let's say a Micro Four Thirds, and a full frame sensor is going to have less noise than let's say an APS-C sensor.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think we're going to go ahead and end the Q&A session there. So really appreciate you coming and showing your HDR workflow when it comes to the noise reduction process and how you kind of combat that. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
We're getting a ton of great comments here, and people are really appreciative of all of the tips you gave them. New stuff to learn about.
My pleasure.
Well, thank you again, and everybody have a great evening or morning wherever you're coming from, and we'll just be talking to you later.